Hello, welcome back my fellow jellyfish. Welcome or welcome back actually. And I have made my 1000th video last time, which was really amazing. I really love the painting and I am very proud of what I have accomplished so far. But of course we're going to continue, and for this video I have made a very cute scene. It's about a calf with some snapdragons, and those are very particular kind of flower that I really like. And with this painting I'm going to show you a couple of key watercolor techniques that you can learn from your own home and that you can put to use in your own projects. And I really want to show you how to do like from start to finish. So we start with the sketch and the composition, and then go on with the watercolor painting and finally the line art. So I hope you really like it. That's all I want to say. Let's get on with it. I love calves and cows. They can look so adorable or elegant or downright wacky depending on the breed. Especially those like muscle cows look very weird to me. One of the biggest hurdles for many artists is the blank page, but don't let it intimidate you. Think of your sketch as a friendly road map to guide the painting. For this piece I chose a calf in a 3/4 pose with a very sweet expression. It was a bit different from the sketch that I made some time before. I started by drawing my border first. I use borders in a lot of my pieces. Borders help determine the scale of the subject, and I'm inspired by the sharp, decorative borders from Mucha's Art Nouveau pieces. He uses a lot of borders and stylized frames in his work. I love suggesting a frame without fully drawing it, letting the viewer's mind complete the shape. And in here I only draw the top and the bottom part and some broken pieces on the side. I have a specialized shape ruler to help me create sharper shapes, but if you want to make a border you don't need those special rulers per se. Once that border is down, I place the calf slightly right of the center. That is the rule of thirds at work. It gives the composition movement and leaves room for the snapdragons to breathe a bit more. Also, when it's off center, it usually creates a more dynamic and interesting pattern than when it's sticking right in the middle. In this piece, the ear of the calf is going past the framing. It gives the piece a more three-dimensional effect. And just so you know, if I am in the flow, I do not really think about how I draw something. So if you want to have a tutorial for the calf's head, I need to think about that. I have a circle, and then suddenly when I'm drawing I have a calf's head. So if you want to have this step by step as a tutorial, please put your ideas in the comments. Using a reference does help me a lot. With the calf peacefully sketched in, it's time for the flowers, the snapdragons, also known as calf's snout. They were believed by old herbalists to resemble a calf's nose, but also the face of a dog, or, as in the current name, dragons. They appear everywhere in folklore as symbols of grace, protection, secrets, and even deception. Their name comes partly from the way that the bloom opens like a dragon's mouth when squeezed. It's an interesting thought, isn't it, that a flower could be a symbol of both grace and deception. So snapdragons, especially the flowers, symbolize grace, strength, and a magical or protective power. And another power that they had was protecting secrets. So if you wanted the secret to stay within the circle, you could use snapdragons in your spell to keep that secret safe. The flowers can also signify deception or graciousness depending on the context, while the specific color of the flower adds even more meaning. For example, red is for passion, yellow is for happiness, and white for purity. They were also used in folklore to ward off evil, or were given as a sign of admiration and strength. In this piece I let the snapdragons embrace the calf, so a few tail stems rising on the left and a couple peeking out from the right. Let those stems curve naturally. Nothing in nature grows like ruler straight. And because they come in many colors, I found a great reference where the flowers were a beautiful pink and yellow. I knew the calf would be largely white and maybe black or brown, so I wanted some nice colors to complement the maybe like boring neutrals. Before moving on, take a moment to check this drawing. If you are drawing with me, do the shapes overlap nicely? Does the piece feel balanced? Do you want to change anything before anything? I took another look at the snout of the calf because it's interesting to draw because I'm not used to it. It's not really square, although most cows have a more square nose than calves, but it's also not very round. It's more like a chubby T shape with large nostrils. And just below that nose is a very thin lip. There's little to no chin to cows. Another thing to notice, cows and calves have very long eyelashes. I think that's partly the reason why they look so beautiful sometimes. Of course, the cows needed to protect against bugs and little specks that otherwise would fly into their eyes. But their big faces and innocent look always makes me smile. Hello my little jellyfish, I want to take this quick moment to thank you for all your support and thank you all for people who support me on Ko-fi. Ko-fi is a very simple way to support me one time or monthly, and with Ko-fi you can actually buy me like a coffee to support me and the things that I do. And you think like the value of a simple coffee is not that much, but if you add all those coffees up, it will result into more paper, more paint, and I can actually take more time to make these videos and these paintings especially for you. So if you're interested, the link is in the description. When it comes to supplies, I used a couple. Let's start with the paint. For the background I used a Meaden Violet. So it's for Meaden Violet. For the cow I used a lot of burnt umber and sienna. Let me just grab it. So I used my Van Gogh palette. I used this China White. I used yellow ochre, mostly burnt sienna and burnt umber. I used for the flowers lemon yellow, azo yellow, this particular rose, and this sap green. I also used a very small amount of this ultramarine blue and paint gray. When it comes to brushes, I only had 3. My biggest one is a size 10. This one is from Da Vinci. These are from Temu of all places. The numbers are worn off, so I'm not exactly sure how big these are. This is, I think, number 8. And I think this is a number 4, but I'm not sure. Furthermore, you need 2 containers for water. This one with the little cap I use for rinsing. So you fill half of it with water, you rinse your brushes, and this is one, it's gonna be dirty. And this one I'm going to use for the clear water. So do not confuse these two. If you use this water for like loading your brushes with water, things will get very muddy and you don't get clear colors. So use a separate container with clear water. Very optional are the gel rollers and the fine liners. I really like to line things in the end, so I use a jelly roll size 8 and I have size 10. And I use my fine liners going from size, I think size 8 to a size 005. This one is the smallest I have. But these are optional. Using a dotting tool, I apply blue drawing gum to preserve the little dots, stars and the catch light in the eyes. Just a little circle or oval blank. After that dries, I paint the background in a strong coffee strength violet. If you're not sure how strong your mixture is, test it first on a scrap piece of paper to get the right value. If it's too intense, you can use more water. If you think it's too watered down, you can add more paint. I work largely wet on dry, starting from the top left. I put down the first layer for the background color. If you notice me wearing a glove, by the way, it's to keep oils off the paper and to avoid smudging the graphite. When I'm painting large parts like this, I'm trying to keep a drop on the paper while moving up and down. With that little drop, I can refresh the load on my brush and start from there without having too much bloom going on. Now for the snapdragons, I started with orange as the flat color for the flowers. The purple background will make these flowers pop. As that dries, I block in the calf. Paint gray forms the midtones of the white part of the head. It's very diluted with water, so it isn't too dark. I actually misjudged a bit here and it was a bit too dark, so I used some extra water to disperse the color a bit. And even white fur needs shadow to feel dimensional, so that's why I started with a darker color. Burnt umber fills the other patches. And for the snout, I mix a warm pinky yellow. With some pure paint gray, I filled in the eyes. Also notice that I use a bit of the snout color, so the pinky yellow, into the snapdragons. It ties the whole painting together. I love to listen to podcasts and long-form YouTube videos while painting. What do you like to listen to? Put your recommendations in the comments. So now I have successfully mapped out the colors. Let everything dry before starting the next layer. A watercolor's glow comes from transparent layers and patience is key. I try to work on one part of the painting and let it dry while I work on the other part, so there is less waiting involved. My patience is not the best, but this is how I work around it. To add more color and depth to the eye, I put a wash of brown on the inner part. The cow's eye is not just black, although it appears like that. Next, I begin suggesting fur with short strokes using my size 8 brush. I look at the direction that the fur grows on the real calf. Those directional strokes really define the form. If you actually do not follow that direction, the form will look more wonky. You don't have to be too precise in this phase. I leave gaps so the underlayer shows through and it gives a natural texture. And if you prefer a more loose look, you can soften the edges by painting while the base layer is still damp, so wet in wet. White is an odd color in watercolor palettes. It's more opaque than most other colors, and yet it is barely visible when I use it. I did try and create more structure to the lightest parts of the cow. I think I need to invest in some white wash to get a stronger white. I also went a bit too dark into the painting. I should have gone from white to a more stronger dark color. But that's all in the past. What I did do on purpose is I put less detail in the neck and back of the calf. The neck is behind the head, and to create more depth, you can play with the amount of detail you put into each section. The more detail you put in, the closer it appears to the viewer. I went back in with the burnt umber, and I think it's my 6 size brush. I take extra care of the hair surrounding the eyes. The eyes might look more wonky otherwise because eyes are one of the main attractions of a painting. For the greenery, I use sap green as a base and add layers of mixed greens for depth. Making the right green for a specific plant can be more difficult than it seems. You can use one kind of green to start, but if you want to make it more alive, you need to add more tones. And for the lettering, a dark paint gray works very nicely. And now for some more intense pinks. I deepen the outer edges of the petals, leaving the centers soft and warm yellow. I use a wet and dry hatching technique to create those crisp color transitions, and using adjustable water and pigment for variety in the color. Each petal has its own direction and its own bend. Following those bends helps keep the flowers lively. Again, as with the fur, the hatching is following this one direction per petal. To finish the petals, I use lemon yellow and later on azo yellow for the inside of the flowers. The frame gets a wash of yellow ochre. Yellow is complementary to purple, so it ties the flowers to the background and intensifies the contrast. I also use the yellow ochre to paint shadows in the flowers. And with some leftover purple, I fill in part of the title. Though I did grab a brush that was a bit too small, it would have been easier if I had taken a bigger one to create smoother strokes. With a touch of burnt sienna, I warm up the finer details in the cow head. I am going over some of the colors to deepen that specific color. Especially the eyes needed to be a bit darker. I remove the drawing gum to reveal the preserved whites, and then I add extra highlights with a white gel pen. The camera was not really picking it up, I see, but at the time I was drawing in those hairs with the gel pen, it made quite a difference. And then I used fine liners to add the last details. I used fine liners from size 8 to the smallest 005 for my work, and I used the biggest ones on the parts that need the most attention and are on the foreground. The less attention something needs, or when it's a tiny detail, the finer the line. This also helps to create more depth. that was the video. I had so much fun making this little calf with the snapdragons, and I really loved that I could show you how I made it, like from the sketch to having several layers of watercolor on this to having the final touches with the fine liner, and I actually framed it. So I was so happy to do that. Thank you for watching, and thank you for all your support. Consider subscribing to the channel so you can be notified if I upload another video. You can also support me on Ko-fi, the link is in the description. Thank you again so much, my little jellyfish. See you next video.
Let us follow the starlight and float into the next day. Let's end this now in the night and find our own special way. Goodbye, my dear, see you next time till we meet again.